All right. Jumped right into a shoulder workout here. Shoulders are one of the smaller muscle groups. I feel like most shoulder exercises should be done. Well, I'm going to be specific. The lateral raises, you don't need a lot of weight. Um, Rear delt exercises, they're small muscles. The delts are relatively small, so I believe I personally had a lot better response to less weight. But these are basic principles that apply to every muscle group for the most part. It's getting to a weight where you could really feel the muscle being stimulated and working, and you don't really notice too much anything else. Once you're going with heavier weight, it becomes more difficult to do that. Relatively speaking, if you're just trying to get heavy weight up for a few reps, you wind up, often sacrificing form. I always start my shoulder routine with just focusing on rear and side delts, high reps, low weight, just do a ton of reps until they're burning. Um, Generally, I start with the rear delts just like this, dumbbells. I pretty much start all my shoulder sessions with high reps, rear delts, side delts, uh, really emphasizing side and rear delts. They're very small muscles, high reps. I personally, it was one of the lagging muscles I've had for many years, so it's one of the specific muscle groups that I spent a lot of time trying to really figure out what worked best for me. And I've gone through many iterations over the years of shoulder routines, even breaking in the front and rear delts on separate days, training rear delt with back and front delts with chest. Um, Ultimately, what I do now is generally my shoulder workouts start with lots of seated lateral raises, rear dumbbell flies. Um, I won't. I don't do a lot of um, front laterals. My arms directly in front of me. Actually, I think in this exercise, I do a few sets holding a, a 25-pound plate. But in terms of front delt development, I think that's best left for pressing exercises. So I generally will, at this point, when I do chest, I focus primarily on upper chest and I do overhead presses at a slight angle. I do all my pressing motions on my chest day now, along with shoulder presses. So generally, I said I start with a lot of rear delt work, side delts, um, some exercise that will definitely target a little bit more of the front delt area. Technically speaking, you can't really separate what part of the delt you're hitting perfectly. I feel like you tend to favor the rear delts or the front delts. You can't just isolate the side delts. You're going to hit some rear delts, and vice versa. That applies to most muscle groups. So what I've done with my shoulder routine over many years, in many iterations, and I'm sure it's going to continue to happen. It's just lots of lateral motions, lots of rear delt work, um, and I like to do some heavy dumbbell shrugs for the traps. I personally, I believe trap development traps are most responsive to heavy weight and stretching. Even though I constantly talk about the lengthening of the muscle, Um, Traps in particular, people who do farmers walks and heavy deadlifts and exercises where there's a ton of weight uh, hanging, that you're holding on to, and your traps are stretched out. So shrugs in particular, I believe you need a good amount of weight to really activate them and get a good response from them. I've been trying to do them more. It's one of those exercises that it's easy for me at the end of a workout to not want to do because it generally, used to entail lifting, a lot of weight. I would want to use the heaviest dumbbells, usually like 150s, and I keep a set of 120s to do the heavy shrugs with. But I really do believe it's that heavy stretch that really helps build big traps. Here, doing another variation of rear delts. Cables are great. Like I said, these are small muscle groups. You don't really need to go heavy. You just want to, try your best to isolate them and not let the larger muscle groups take over. Um, the delts are really important. They really emphasize aspects of the physique. Wide shoulders, give you that X look is very important. It's all about the ratio shoulder to waist. Well, in particularly in men's physique. Yeah, I'm doing one of these overhead raises variations that definitely, for me, target the front delts a lot. Um, but I treat this just like any of the other lateral raises I do. Not crazy heavy. I'm sitting, so there's not much swinging going on. I generally do these types of exercises till there's a good amount of burning in my shoulders, and like I said, you're not going to be doing low reps. I think shoulders respond better to high reps. Not to mention, that's one of the areas that's easy to injure. I don't think the shoulders are, it's not a natural thing to lift your arms up like that with a lot of weight. It's not a something you do every day, and you know you start throwing around a lot of weight. It's when you start, raising the likelihood of injuries. Just doing a few more sets of that. Generally, with this, I'll do 3 sets, 4 sets sometimes. It varies on how I'm feeling and how my shoulders are feeling. And also, when it comes to shoulders, it's the one muscle group that is very difficult to isometrically contract. It's not like your bicep or your pec or your tricep where you can just like squeeze it and contract it very hard and, without moving any of your an actual joint or going through a range of motion. Uh, the shoulder, it's not a easy muscle to just connect with. So that in particular is why I go lighter. It's fun. I always catch myself when I say lighter because it's all relative to light and heavy is relative to your rep range. If you could do something 3 times, it's heavy. If you could do something 20 times, it's light. It's not. It's relative to the individual. But when I say light, I mean something that I could do for more than 10 reps with perfect form and really focus in on the contraction. I'm doing individual side laterals, side raises with dumbbells. This is another great exercise. I like to try and lean a little bit so the dumbbell hangs down and you get a little extra range of motion at the top. I like these exercises. The one arm dumbbell laterals while holding on to some generally go a little bit heavier than you would if you're just doing 2 at the same time. You're being able to hold on to something that's not moving I feel you get a little bit more leverage. And with this exercise, I feel like you can really focus on where you're feeling the contraction in your shoulder. And everybody's anatomy is a little different. I think you should always find the range or the area that feels best. You know, going straight out to the side might not feel as good as having a slight like a 5 degree or 10 degree bend. I think that stuff is relative to your anatomy, and also these things come over time. Eventually, you do these exercises so many times, you learn slight variations and ways of tweaking things that over time just works for you. There's no shortage of training methods and theories, and you'll see it all from people that go very light, high reps all the time and compete in the Olympia, and then there's people that live very, very heavy and have the same results. So at the end of the day, it's what you best connect with mentally and physically. It's like when people ask about what cardio is best, it's like the cardio that you're doing best is the one that's best. If somebody says they, you know, love the stair mill but hate running, well, there's your answer, or vice versa. Some people, you know, prefer different things. I can't stand cardio. I don't say I can't stand it. It's just I have a short attention span. I much prefer doing lots of exercises with short breaks, kind of like high intensity interval training, to keep my heart rate up. And I do training sessions like that where I have done just like back to back exercises, short, like a almost like it's like a pump up session, just getting blood in the muscle and um, getting the heart rate up. You do that for you start 15 minutes or whatever before it's going to build up your cardiovascular just as well as anything else will. People don't realize just it's if you don't do any type of cardio and just do weight training, you're still going to build your cardiovascular system. You're out of breath at the end of a heavy set. I generally save the shrugs for the last part of the workout. It is going to be the heaviest exercise I do. Plus, um, you don't want to hurt yourself, and saving it for the end is the best time because you're going to have the most. You're going to be warmed up. But I always get a little nervous doing shrugs. I don't think about the fact that I'm missing my leg, and I will go and grab these 120-pound dumbbells, not realizing I'm putting a ton of stress on, one side of the erector muscles in my back, or, favoring one side over the other. And that's a really easy way to, you know, create an annoyance for the next few days. And I'll say for sure, one muscle group that is always sore are my traps. It's very easy for me to do 3 sets of shrugs, and honestly, I don't even need to do crazy shrug. I could lift a heavy weight, just like let it hang and stretch my traps out. I'll get that'll make them pretty sore. I believe there's something to be said about just stimulating the central nervous system. I think it's good to have certain exercises that are very heavy. Um, like I also look at shrugs for myself as an opportunity to, you know, to have my body feel the sensation of lifting a very substantial amount of weight. I believe it's very beneficial for overall joints and tendons, bones. Here I'm doing now a set of standing dumbbell shrugs. Like I was saying, I do this just to, hold the 120-pound dumbbells and just feel the weight. And also have my have this thing going through my bone, get some pressure on it as well. It helps strengthen the bone.